No, you there.
Hi. Hey, everybody. So welcome to our online version of the Conversation Sunday chat that we normally do, where we bring out casts and directors and talk about the show. Because for these mortal hosts, we did this online instead of with an audience, which is one of the weird things we'll talk about. We decided to do an online chat the same way. And so we've got here with me, let's see, you guys want to just say hi and introduce yourselves? Start with Mark and go.
Hello, Mark Colson. I played Earl.
Hi, I'm Emily Sutton-Smith. I played Phyllis.
Hi, I'm Anna. I played Anna Ryzenga. I played Megan.
And I'm Paige Conway. I'm the director.
So you guys, during this process, we found out about 2 weeks into rehearsals. Is that about right, Paige?
Yeah, it was about 2.
About 2 weeks into rehearsals, that we were going to have to quit at like the end of our 3rd week of rehearsals, basically, because the coronavirus, COVID-19, was taking over the planet, and everyone was going into quarantine and lockdown. And we knew that there was going to be a shutdown for our state coming. So we suddenly switched from performing this for, the 100-seat theater that we work at, Williamston Theatre, to do nothing at all with it or put it online. And we switched really quickly, and it was about 6 or 7 days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like less than, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was 5.
Now we're going to
when I heard.
So forget the audience. And I want to talk about what that process was like for you guys and talk about the play itself and what that experience was like for everybody. So Paige, as a director, I mean, what did that do to you suddenly finding that out?
It was definitely a loop I wasn't quite ready for. Like there was some level of, I think, expecting it and like hoping that would be the version of it, because then at least people would see it. But I am not a film director. Haven't touched a camera since college. So that was, it's a lot of like adjusting for angles and stuff that we're always like thinking about in theater, but not to the same extent, because now we're looking at it through 3 angles instead of the 100 different angles that you have in the theater. So instead of just being like, oh, well, not everyone's going to see this, but like 30 people will see it, it's fine. That's no longer an option. And it's like, oh no, none of these 3 seats can see it, so we have to completely change that blocking, and you can't stand there, and this moment doesn't work anymore. Right. So yeah, it was a lot of adjusting, but it was like, I mean, it was stressful, but it was also kind of fun, like a nice new challenge. Would have been cooler if we'd had more than like 4 days to figure it out, but it was still fun.
So actors, what was that like for you guys to make that switch?
There was a little bit of grieving that went on because I knew that we weren't going to have the audience there. And the audience is such an integral part to the performance. And I knew that we were getting shortchanged on the rehearsal hours because we essentially shot it on what would have been our tech day. So we would have gotten 3 or 4 more dress rehearsals in after that. And those, runs and everything give you a lot of information about the arc of the story. And you just sort of accumulate knowledge and a sense of settling into the character. So I knew we weren't going to get that. And I knew we weren't going to get the feedback from the audience. And it's such a kooky kind of a play that can be interpreted in so many ways. I knew that just the energy of the audience would open my eyes to different interpretations of the character and the story and the impact and the emotional weight of the stuff that happened in the play. So I knew that we wouldn't get that. And I was a little panicked because I had to make sure that I got all the lines right. And I was getting a lot less rehearsals. And so I wasn't sure that I was going to get all the lines right. And then on the other end of it, there was, oh my God, my kid's not in school this week anymore. And oh my gosh, we have to figure out how to shoot this thing, and do we have a filmmaker, and do we have the technology to do it? So there was like the other part of it, which was probably unique to me just because I'm on the staff at the theater, you know, and how do we tell our patrons, and how do we get them to buy tickets, and will we make it? Because we didn't know when the state was going to be shut down. So we knew we could shoot it on Saturday because that's when we could pull everything together. But we didn't know if we were going to be allowed to. So that
As the producer, I will say that was a fear that was so big in my head because, you know, we were like, yes, let's film it. We'll do it on Tech Day. We'll do it Saturday. But then we kept hearing, yep, she's going to order a lockdown. The governor's going to lock it down. And it came like a day or so, we were like right when we were doing it, that we were going to lock down on Friday. So we went, okay, ooh, we made it. Okay, let's, but at the same time, we're also, I mean, we cut down to a skeleton crew. You know, we had ASMs not working and no designers in the room at the same time and that kind of stuff to make sure everybody was being safe.
And we were practically drinking hand sanitizer.
Right.
It's like all the time.
And fortunately, it's a show where the three of you don't physically interact very much, so you could be apart on the stage, you know, because if we were doing, you know, Frankie and Johnny and the Claire de Lune, we'd have just had to change today. There's no chance. Everybody's laying on top of each other the whole show. Just cut it.
Naked.
Mark, what was that like for you?
It was kind of stressful in the way that Emily was talking about, and the fact that you just want more time in order to get a performance together.
Yeah.
And you do count on the the tech part of it and the dress rehearsals, and also to the previews. If you treat those as rehearsals, it's just a lot of time that you really get to live in those shoes, where it was sort of broken up before. We didn't get those full runs, and so there was like a little bit of terror going into it. Initially, I thought that we were going to shoot it on Sunday as well. And then because things got, escalated, then we just said, no, we're just going to shoot this thing on Saturday. So that meant we had like 2 performances to kind of get it right, so that was a little stressful. But then there's another part of it, I think, that is really helpful in the fact that we as actors, sometimes we get into our heads a little bit too much. And so there was a point where you just had to just let it all go, trust yourself, trust the people that you were on stage with, trust what Paige had done with us in rehearsals, and just kind of go for it, and so there was something really, I think, exciting maybe that came out of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the result turned out really good, I think. I'm really pleased with what we got, especially how hard everybody worked to get what we got in that little short time where we switched it up. Because, like you said, there's from Tech Day to actual opening night at our process at Williamston Theatre anyway, there's almost 2 full weeks that just went away. And I think everybody was like, what? I can't. But we got really nice responses from audiences who did, buy the link and download or watch the show on their computers, and even we had a few critics who watched it and then published things that said, so this isn't really a review because I don't review film, but it's kind of a review because it's play. So I loved this, and then we got nice feedback, which was great. Anna, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, very similarly to what Mark and Emily were saying about, kind of both the fear and just like not knowing what was going to happen and just kind of having to put your hands up and be like, okay, whatever. I think one thing that really didn't hit me until we had finished filming our second take was kind of the sadness of having to say goodbye to a character early, because I think the really beautiful thing about theater and stage work is that you get to spend this whole rehearsal process creating this character and cultivating them and finding different ways to fall in love with them in different ways. And then you get, a couple weeks to a month of performing and getting to live in their shoes. And for this, while we were so lucky to be able to do it in some facet, we had to say goodbye to our characters super early. And so kind of like Emily was saying, that grieving process, it just kind of hit like, oh, we have to say goodbye to these characters, which was kind of sad.
And each other too, and we couldn't hug goodbye or anything. At the end of the day, we're like, bye, see ya.
Yeah,
wash your hands.
So weird.
Everyone's running for their cars,
Right.
Yeah, it's.
Well, I think also too, it kind of said too that this was like a really I maybe you guys, you know, I mean, I'll be interested to hear what you have to say, but I think this is a really hard play. It was a hard play for me just because the beginning of this play is so sort of disjointed from the rest of the characters in the play, and so we were sort of like on our own to a certain extent. Yeah, our scene partners and our acting partners were up on stage with us, and so there's some sort of camaraderie there, right? But I mean, it was really sort of isolating as far as all those monologues were concerned, and that there wasn't like a linear arc that my character followed until I felt like I got to some of the dialogue stuff. Then I was feeling kind of more of an arc, you know, that you would feel in like a regular play. And I found this one hard, and the fact that we, you know, bumped up the timetable was, you know, just kind of made it doubly tough sometimes, you know, and we did it.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit and get into the heart of the play, because, you know, on an early, one of the other questions we got was from a patron. I really loved this show, and I would love to hear what the playwright wanted audiences to take away from it, because I've been thinking about it for a couple of days now after I watched it, and it stuck with me. And I'm wondering if what the playwright had in mind, you know. And so we posed that to Eric, and he answered us, and we put out the video where he talked about it being a real exploration for him of faith and that feeling that people get when they feel like they're not alone in their body, whether it's, you know, a little voice talking to them or a baby or something else, and community and those things. And so as you guys went through the play, like you said, Mark, it's interesting because all the actors have these long monologues that really set everything up for the audience and pull us in. But I mean, it's not until page what, Emily, when you and Mark finally have that first talk, or Paige, you know, when it was
26.
like 20.
Yeah.
I think it's 26 is the little liver scene.
The liver, yeah.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because we really fall for all three people. And that's the writing and the performing and the directing. But that moment, finally, 26 pages in, when two people actually talk to each other instead of to the audience, that we go, they are going to talk to each other. Ooh, what's going to happen? You know, what was that like for you to direct, Paige, or for anybody else to act?
It was super cool and very difficult. The thing I'm saddest about with it all having to go and be filmed was that we lost a lot of the tiny connections between characters that happened before page 26. Because we kind of built in these moments where like the three of them are figuring out their story together, and they're starting to see where they fit into each other's narrative, and how all of it feels like it's one story instead of three separate things. And we'd like done a ton of work to like find which moments worked for that and which moments like it's not necessary. And then like that's the thing that of course, you know, you can't see, like it's still happening on the stage when we're filming it, but just like due to angles and not being able to see all three of them at once, you know, like as an audience member, you have no idea that it exists. So like that's the thing that I grieved most about it when I like saw it. I was like, oh, all those connections, like they're just gone. So like we don't see them actually connect until page 26. So it was like, I loved that part of it, of like finding ways to connect the three of them, even though they shouldn't be connected, right? Like that was kind of one of my favorite things about the whole process.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it was a cool challenge to like find ways to keep audiences engaged in how these three people are, you know, integral parts of their lives.
Sure.
But yeah, it's like a weird little, it's a little mystery in itself of like how to direct that and how to keep it
right. Well,
tight
because
together.
I got to see like the designer run throughs and see that happening, you know, it's one of those things that just didn't quite translate from,
right,
you know, the stage to the screen, because when you're watching the whole play, there could be a monologue, you know, as an audience member, you're seeing all those little moments. And then when you have to condense it and go, no, we're only watching from this angle, you know, those things just went away. that's just the way it was. Yeah. I don't know. What about you, Anna or Emily?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Anna.
Well, just speaking kind of to those tiny moments, I feel like I probably out of the three of us had the least connection, at least dialogue wise, with the other two characters. So those tiny moments that Paige was kind of talking about are really what got me through the entire play, because I had so few moments of actual connection with the other characters. And so figuring out what that meant to my character was really interesting, and just, how that spoke to her on a deeper level. But yeah, those tiny moments meant any strings that I could grasp at for her to have some connection were really, really important. And although unfortunately you didn't get to see a lot of them, I was still able to do them. So at least I still, had that for the rest of it.
I think what struck me, I honestly had a hard time watching the video because I don't like watching myself. But I was peeking over John's shoulder as he was, doing stuff, and as he was watching it. And I think that because of the way that we had to do it, we didn't get to explore the humor as much in the play. I think the play is so funny, and there are moments that are so funny, and I think we would have found more had we gone in front of an audience and they had given themselves permission to laugh and to find the levity in the moments, about my character with the cats and with the bad relationships and the dating debacles and things like that. I think there's a lot there that would have been really fun to mine, to get the audience liking us as a collective more, and sort of rooting for us. And so, you get the sense of the absence of that in the empty seats in the video. And that's, that would have been really fun to, experience. And for the audience, I think audiences would have gotten more out of it, and would have related to the people more, because they would be less on a pedestal and more just people going through their lives. And these are the conversations that we all have with ourselves while we're driving our cars to the grocery store or whatever. They're not monologues that are being presented, they're life. So I think that in that way, it may have been more relatable in a live presentation mode.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that several people who've watched it have commented on is how weird it is to see empty theater seats behind people. Because, when you watch a film, you don't see that. You see whatever there is. But in the theater, when you go in and you sit in the theater, you expect to see other people. And, the scenery is fake. And, if this was a real room, there'd be walls everywhere, and all those things. So your imagination kicks in. But then suddenly you put it on a screen, and that part of you that goes, this should be more real, sort of snaps into place. And so it's so weird to see all the seats behind you guys and go, oh, those are empty. That was a weird, sad thing for me. Like, where are the people? Yeah. Because what we normally do really is much more about being in a room with each other, and the actors and the audience and, the performers and the people sharing that are breathing the same air and having the same moment. And so it works, and it worked as a film, but what none of them have is that connection of, I'm 4 feet away from the performer as they're going through this. And so your heart just gets ripped a little more, It's just interesting.
And especially in the theater too. I mean, that's the beauty of the theater, is there's like a communion that happens between the actor and the audience.
Yep.
That is really palpable, and it's a thing that you really feed on as well as an actor. And it's not just to say whether you feel like an audience is with you or they laugh at you or whatever, right? But there's really this sort of energy that's created between performer and actor that wasn't there for this. And that was a little weird, and that the cameras were a little bit farther away, because sometimes I can get that same sort of feel. If the camera is closer to me, I feel more of a kind of a connection, that I almost treat it like it's an audience member. But the cameras were far away, not like they were far away. It's not that big of a theater, right? But yeah, there was something that was kind of strange about that, And
it was almost kind of exhausting in that way, because you don't get that like energy from that connection with the live audience.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, there's almost like this extra little spark of energy that we had to produce ourselves because we didn't have that, to try to keep that going, especially with this specific story, because we wanted that energy to go somewhere and get somewhere.
Yeah, and this story is so much about direct storytelling and direct.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you guys were, until we had to tell them not to come, you guys were going to connect with the audience all the way through the play, like just eye contact with everybody. And to have that go away had to be weird. And so that sort of slides into one of the other questions we got for all of you, actually, which was, when you found out that it was not going to be an audience, did that change your approach to the thing? You know, one of the comments, you know, was, how did you change how you prepped for a performance then? You know, and the other one was, you know, it seems like it would be less stressful knowing you didn't have an audience there, but I don't think it was for you guys. I don't know. Anybody jump in?
It was super stressful. I mean, but it was stressful in the context of the moment of the world. So we all had the external stresses of, oh my gosh, are we going to have work? Are we going to shut down? Is everything going to shut down? Do I have enough food in my house? You know, my kids are home from school. How are we going to handle all that? So there was the external forces of that. But internally, I didn't feel like we had enough time. For me, I couldn't change the style of the presentation because I knew that we were going to be still in the same space. It was going to be the big space as opposed to here with a camera. So it's not like I could change it for sound or anything like that in the way that you might adapt your line of vision or whatever for filmmaking. We were still in a theater and it was still a theatrical presentation. So in that sense, I didn't think that I could change any kind of style choice. And really it was more like, I have to make sure that I remember all the words because we're getting a lot less rehearsal, and tell the story nice and clearly and cleanly, and be authentic and be in the moment, and drop all the stuff that's stressful that's coming into the room from the world. So I didn't change it. And like Anna said, there's an energy that you get from an audience. So it's a little nerve-wracking because you don't want to mess up in front of an audience. And so there's always that sort of like little jittery thing when you're performing it. But if you've got the rehearsal, you know you've got it. So you can just focus in and stay on track with it. So that would have been less stressful than what we ended up by doing.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think for me, I mean, there was the way that we started out the play and the monologues for the most part. I think none of that really changed for me, but I really was aware of the camera. So in the same way that you open up for the audience, we were always talking about where the cameras were, not always talking about, we were really quickly talking about, you know, where the cameras were and to try to open yourself up for the camera. And so then I thought, you know, because the beauty of film is there's a real intimacy with the camera that, you know, that you find. And so there were some times that in my more, you know, sort of, you know, introspective moments or whatever, I think that I brought my performance down just a little bit because I was really hoping the camera's going to find me. And sometimes it did. And sometimes because we were kind of limited as far as the, you know, where the cameras were, or that someone wasn't going to be able to zoom in on you, right? That the camera was static and the, you know, the shot was the shot, you know, a master shot or a medium shot or whatever, right? That some of those moments for me, I don't think completely worked, right? That I think I created some moments that were a little too intimate.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for the camera, and weren't possibly big enough for the theater. You know, that's what I sort of came away with. And it wasn't across the board. It was just in a few moments for me.
Sure. And a lot of that comes down to, you know, it was really a hybrid piece between theater and film. And it was one with such a tiny window of execution. You know, had we had another 3 days, we could have said, Mark, that little thing you're doing there is great. Let's get John and Andy, the filmmakers, let's get them to come into you on that, and really tighten up on you. And because of the time, we were like, okay, and that take was great. We're done.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Anna, how about for you?
Yeah, I think that at first, the only thing that I really even tried to change was just, the camera awareness, since we did have to change up the blocking a little bit and that sort of thing. But when we first shot our first run through on camera, it threw me off a little bit more than I was expecting it to, just because all of a sudden you're going through we tried to do as many run-throughs as possible, just because for this piece especially, that was going to be the easiest way to get it in our systems. But then all of a sudden feeling like, oh, is that camera going to catch me if I'm angled this way? And there's just another added layer that you don't really expect to be thinking about in the moment. So I felt like, luckily we did a second whole run through where we filmed, and I feel like those adjustments were easier to make. But I think trying to change it up completely and changing up the acting style would have just been so much to put in your head, especially in the moment with the time frame that we had. So I don't know. It just would have been really difficult to try to alter the performance too much.
Yeah, sure.
And it's interesting, you mentioned, sorry, just to comment on what Anna was saying about, is the camera picking me up? Are they getting this shot? Can they see my face? Normally on a set, you don't necessarily have to think about that. There's a director, and there's a director of photography, and there's an assistant director, and a whole bunch of people telling you play it to here because the light is here, and you do little teeny bits and pieces, and then they put them all together, and they tell you, oh, yeah, we got it. We looked, we watched, they played it back, and they double checked. We didn't have any of that, so we were kind of flying blind from a adapting kind of standpoint. We didn't have enough people on the cameras, and we didn't have enough time to do pickups and things like that. So,
yeah.
Yeah, and what I'll say too is thank God for that last and final run too, because like, yeah, well, because we were adjusting to a lot, like on the fly, and so it was that first run for me was technical. Yeah, we got through it, that was just my take on it, was because I was just, I couldn't help but be in my head a little bit, because I was just thinking about too much stuff that didn't have anything to do with the character and what I was going through. And I mean, yes, I was able to hit some of those moments, but once again, thank God for that second run.
And the three actors had all of that stuff going on and processing. And at the same time, Paige, you were dealing with not just help the actors shape the thing, but the design team too. And because everything got condensed so quickly, we really had to say to the designers, pare back stuff because we're not going to have time to make it work. So what was that for you too?
That day before we filmed was insane. Our poor lighting designer, the wonderful Dustin Miller, he came in and he had been programming all week at home cues, and he'd gotten like 85 cues in, and that was really only like 30-40 pages. And he's like, this is way too much. And he like went through and he showed us all the cues that he had done, and they were just stunning, like some of the most beautiful looks I've ever seen. And then John came in, and it was like, the camera's not going to pick up anything like that. So we had to like just go to this basically like totally white stage and like really pick our moments. And there were like a few that I really fought for, that I was like, no, this moment has to be like, we have to feel something theatrical about this. But yeah, it was this very strange, like, just kind of eliminating of the technical aspects. Like, we lost so many of the lovely projections done by Rachel Tuba, just with the lights being so bright and the stage, like the platform being such a light color, like all of that light was just bouncing off of it and straight onto the projection screen. So we were just losing stuff, and we just didn't have time to correct it and change it really.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's one of those where, you know, you hate to see work go away, but all the designers just sort of went with it and went, no, if we're going to get anything done, right, we're going to be shut down. We don't have time to do this. Let's do what we can. And I thought what everybody came up with was great. I mean, Julia Garlot's sound design had to be pared back, and, you know, everything.
Outright changed. A whole bunch of songs just totally changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In like 2 days, we had like 48 hours.
Yeah.
To like find new stuff. Yeah. It's crazy.
Such a different, you know, thank goodness, because the thing we haven't talked about yet is that I'm not a filmmaker. You know, Mark, you act in films a lot. Em, you've done that. But none of us are people who, that's what we do, is like, I don't produce films. So we had to go, if we're going to do this, it can't be me standing in the corner with a camcorder, because that will be awful. But fortunately, John Leopard, you know, our executive director, is a film actor as well. And he has worked a lot with Andy Kirshner, a filmmaker in Ann Arbor, and called him and said, we have this thing, we're doing a play, but now we can't. Can you join us? And the two of them came in and were just so great, I think, in sitting with you, Paige, and going, if she's here, I can film it. Can you put her in this corner, right? And all of those things, like, this is where I need to be. And the collaboration between all of you guys to be able to get that to a point where we could have something to film that didn't look like Caselli's camcorder in the corner. I was so grateful for that, because it was such a huge change for everybody. That just that experience, I think, was amazing for everybody. Andy was so happy to be involved. And he and I emailed a bunch of times since then, because he then took the 2 run-through videos that you guys shot, plus after the second run-through, you did an hour of close-ups and pickup shots, right? And he took and edited all of that together and then sent us a thing that said, okay, how's this look? You know, he did all of the editing, which is so important in film, which is normally, you know, Paige, as the director, normally you would have been sitting with him a lot of that, going, and because we were all quarantined away, we couldn't do that. You know, no, it was really amazing to me to see everyone jump in and make that work, and all of these little elements came together. And so, yeah, thanks for making it work, you guys.
John's here now.
John.
Hi, John.
Tell us, what was that like for you, John, to come in and suddenly be, you know, director of photography?
It was kind of fun, but it was also nerve-wracking. You know, I mean, Andy was great. I was on the center camera, and Andy, for the 2 runs, was on either side of the stage with his camera. And then on the other side of the stage, we just had a stationary camera that filmed whatever it could, you know, like a spy cam kind of thing. And then, and, you know, poor Andy had never seen the show before, so at least I knew kind of what the motion was with my camera in the center. But then Andy was a little bit behind on a lot of things the first time through. And the second time through, he kind of caught up a little bit more, but he was trying to get a closer shot. So, you know, again, it's like if we had 3 days instead of 1,
right,
we would have been able to, but then he did a great job in editing as well. So he used those still cameras, the ones on the opposite side that didn't have a camera operator, a lot actually in editing it together. So he did great. Luckily, he was there for us.
Very cool.
That's all I got.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Great.
You can come back.
So you guys, any other things you want to talk about, or any other thoughts on just the process of the whole thing before we wrap it up and send you back to your quarantine? Get in your box.
Well, I guess for me, I mean, the play, I had issues with, it was just sort of the nature of the play as far as this person that was on this, that I don't think that he'd ever really questioned his spiritual journey before. And all of a sudden he was really confronted by that. And I think that I spent maybe a little bit too much time fighting with that a little bit, and I talked to Paige a lot about it. I was like, well, the last line of the play, that you got to have faith. Ooh, I don't know about that. Just for me personally, there was stuff that I was dealing with because for me it was more of a spiritual journey. And then as I went on with this play in the limited amount of time that we had, it wasn't necessarily that for this character, right? It was his, however he was able to reference it, it was his relationship with God, and how that affected his choices from there on out, right? Rather than me just trying to put it in some sort of new age speak, right? That it was a little bit more basic than that, and I should have tried to latch into that maybe a little bit sooner.
Interesting. Wow. It's thinking about that too. It makes me think of what Eric Coble said about what he wanted, which was audiences to go away without the answers and to be able to fill in their own viewpoints. Because it sounds like sort of what you're saying, Earl was who he was, and everybody's going to go away going, to me, this meant this. And we do that with every play, but one that's so ambiguous at the end, that doesn't say this is what the answers are. I think that was his goal, was to just make people go through this with us and then go away and think about it. And how would they react in those times? What do they think caused everything? He really openly said, maybe it was mass psychosis. Maybe it wasn't, and if he wants that open, I think it's great that you struggled with it as an actor too, Mark. I think that's very cool, actually.
Yeah, I sort of had a similar thing because, all the religious overtones, I kind of go, because personally, I don't, it doesn't resonate with me. And so I really came to the point in the process that we had, and I would have, evolved further, of kind of like letting go, kind of like Phyllis did, just let go. Well, it happened. Well, I'm pregnant. However it happened, it happened. And so it became much more about opening doors. So this weird thing that I'm having to cope with, this change, this challenge to who I am, I'm good at my desk, and this is my box, and I stay in here. Oh, I got to open the lid on the box now because things are different. And it forces the connection with Earl, and it forces the connection with Megan, and the result is this amazing connection with a child. I'm no longer alone. And it's at the beginning, I'm not alone, she says it, and then she says, I'm not alone at the end. Since the birth of my daughter, what is me and what isn't me, the inside and outside, is no longer clear. It's blurred. And I think, to me, that was the essence of the play for me. And everybody has their own different essence that they take away from it, is that none of us are black and white. This is all blurry. Life is blurry. And I think we forget that sometimes because society tells us that things have to be in certain boxes and columns. And if we let the blur happen, we can see more beauty and have more life experience, So that's what I took away from it in the 3 weeks that we had to work on it. Because for me, I really had to let go of the baggage that came with the religious overtones and the religious implications, because that's a man-made thing. Those boxes are man-made, relationship with God or spirit or higher power is dictated from here, but all of the imagery and the iconography that we're also used to is all created by man. So that is what it was doing for me, and that was just my
Well, and I also think it's really interesting what you said there too about the blur, right? And
Yeah.
and part of the process for us was a little bit about the blur.
That's a lot about
in a big way.
That we just had to let go and just do it,
Yeah.
and make this thing happen. I also think too, that I'll say really briefly that I think that if you know, the people that saw this play, I think that, you know, sort of like what you were talking about, Tony, a little bit, was I think everybody would have come out of this with a lot of different ideas about what the play was about. It would have been a, you know, catalyst for a lot of conversations. And I also think that people would have responded to individual characters in very specific ways as well, right? Because there's no clear-cut, you know, protagonist in this thing. And so there are some people that are going to come out of it and go, oh, no, I really responded to Emily's character. I really responded to, you know, Anna's character or my character, whatever it was, right? And so I think that was sort of the interesting thing about this piece, that it would have been interesting to see what exactly happened with that if we had a theater audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Paige or Anna, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like, that was it was definitely the hardest thing about this play, but it was my favorite thing about working on this show, is that, like, by the end of it, I still have more questions than I have answers. I mean, like, I worked on it, you know, I had the script for over a year, and I have an entire notebook where, like, every other page is just another, like, huge note that's like, oh my God, what if the play is actually about this? And, like, none of them are even remotely similar. Like, they're all vastly different. And I was still, like, making those notes as we were going through, like, our final runs, you know, that, like, right before filming. And I think that's, like, one of the really cool things about it is I directed it and I still don't have all the answers, you know. I still have very few answers, like, what little we were able to find and, like, bring to light in the process. I think played really well, but I think, you know, there's still so much up for grabs, and there's still so many questions about it. And like, for me, I think religion plays a heavy part in the show, but I think the play is just about having faith in strangers, and, like, being able to trust each other, even if we don't know each other. Which is what, you know, I was kind of, like, latching into as we were coming to this, like, crazy head, that, like, life imitating art thing, you know, very heavily into this. But yeah, you know, and, like, it could be about a million different things. Like, that's the beauty of it, and the frustrating thing about it ultimately. But, you know, it's
great,
awesome.
Yeah. Anna, what about you?
Yeah, for me, it was just so interesting. And I feel like I've had so many realizations and thoughts now that we're out of it, which is, you know, kind of beautiful, but also kind of frustrating, because there's so much more that I think we all wish we could have done. But just with Megan, she was so interesting because she was younger. She's 17. So she already has so many, you know, complex emotions and thoughts and feelings that she's struggling with. And so for me, it really became about her, like, her need and her drive to connect to something, whatever it is. And I think that that's so interesting in where we are now, because, you know, a lot of us feel kind of isolated and alone, and for her to just, you know, go 110 on something and just be like, this is for me because I need this right now. And I just think it's really powerful, and just finding things, no matter what they are, to make yourself feel whole and to find and, like, feel special and that kind of stuff.
Right. Great. Yeah, finding things to make yourself feel whole. I really like that. Right. Well, you guys, I want to wrap this up and let you go, but I want to thank you too for doing the conversation here, but also again for doing the show. You know, when we found out we weren't going to have an audience, we really had a choice to make. But making the film required everybody to say, yeah, let's make this film. You know, instead of just saying, okay, we need to be done, which we could have all done, any of us. And so it was really kind of a beautiful, magical moment to make the switch and still be able to share this with people. So thanks all of you for participating in that. And thank you, if you're watching this video and you watched the show, thanks for joining us and doing that. I still can't wait till we can all get back in the same room and rehearse something and perform it with people just a few feet away. And we don't know when it's going to come yet. So for now, we'll keep doing this kind of stuff. But everybody, you know, hug yourself and pretend it's from me. So Thanks for being here. Mark and Em and Anna and Paige, thank you for joining us for this. Thanks, John. And hopefully we'll see all of you again at the theater sometime soon. Bye.
Thanks, Tony.
Bye.
Bye.